Welcome everyone to the Washington Academy of Sciences lecture series. Today we have Dr. Frye from Fort Detrick, Maryland, and he's part of the Sustainment of Expeditionary Medical Skills Portfolio Manager for the Army's Future Command and Combat Casualty Care Research Program, JPC-6. Dr. Frye comes with us with a lot of experience. It's so impressive. He has served in the Army Reserves as a preventative medicine officer. He now operates with the Joint Program 6 office at the United States Army Medical Research and Development Command, supporting J9. And he also supports Defense Health Agency and the Army's Futures Command. He provides oversight, support, and assistance in the visioning, research, and development of defense health capabilities that will enable military health care providers to protect and treat warfighters so they may continue to dominate on the battlefields of today and tomorrow. He has an extensive military record, and we are so honored to have him here today to do this Love of Science lecture. Welcome, Dr. Frye. I'm going to hand it over to you so you can do your lecture.
Okay. Thank you very much, Judy. Thank you again, Dr. Stavely and Dr. Mason for inviting me. It's quite a pleasure. I do indeed love science, so I think it's going to be really good. And also, I want to thank the Washington Academy of Science for hosting this session. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get started. I really anticipate that I'm planning on taking us on a little journey. Can you see it? Okay? Can everybody see the presentation? Okay, great. I'm going to take us on a journey, and it's going to be fun. And I'm going to take us over this next hour up in the air. We're going to soar in the air. We might crawl along the rocks. We might run on the prairie. We might rest on a tree branch. We may hide on a leaf. But I'm going to show you a dozen ways that science is helping us take care of the problems that we face every day in the Department of Defense, but also applies to everybody here, in whether you're in the military or not. So for you, I think there's going to be some topics that'll interest you. Take some notes, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. We're going to have some time at the end as well to discuss some of the topics. And so let's just hang on just like this tree frog, and let's get ready to go. I work with a bunch of dummies. I certainly do, and that's literal. Not people I work with, but I am a medical simulation specialist. And what we do is we produce mannequins to train medics and doctors to treat casualties on the battle space. So I think it's kind of funny when we talk about working with dummies every day. The truth is the people I work with are the smartest people in the country. But this is what we do. We try to fool people to thinking that this is real. And that is keeps me busy every day. If anybody has ever worked with medical situation, you realize that it's complicated. The human body just defies all logic. And we, despite all of our advances and millions of dollars, we still can't even remotely replicate what a human can do. So this is a little graphic. If anybody has some problems, just look away. But this is really what we're trying to simulate. We're trying to simulate casualties outside the wire, the real deal, where people are really getting hurt. And this is a mannequin that bleeds and shows all the movements and things like that we're trying to emulate, because we want to practice in this beautiful, clean little field with no threat. Nobody's shooting, nobody's doing anything. And so they can practice and learn their craft, hone their craft, practice over and over repetitively, so they can really work well when it isn't like this. So out in the real battle space, it's nothing like this. And so we practice difficult and dangerous procedures in safety, so it becomes easier once it's impossible. And here's a little picture from way back showing that we've used mannequins for many, many years. This is a little infant. So that's what I do all day. It keeps me entertained. Is I work in the mannequin business, and I am really tasked to solve these problems, just these. So these are about a dozen topics that are that we need science to address. And the middle word is survival, and that is critical. That's really our goal. Is we're not really to produce mannequins. We're trying to get people to survive, whether they're in the war or whether they're not. whether they've been injured or not. And survival is the key. And all these other factors that you see make all the difference. And it isn't just survival. We're trying to get people to be able to excel in their mission. Satisfying the mission is also critical. But surviving and coming home is really what we focus on in my position. And you look at some of these things, I've kind of highlighted them in relative size. Power is critical. Trying to power technology has really become one of our biggest issues. We develop very, very high tech equipment, but there is no cords on the battle space, and there's no extension cords long enough. So we have to take the power with us, and that is no small feat because, as you know, all power is heavy, and also weight is a big limit. Movement and decision making on the right there are probably also some of the most critical issues, and determines whether you get to come home or not. Communication, speed, and stealth. If you think about the battle spaces tomorrow, it certainly isn't going to be a green little pasture or a field. It could be anything. It could be in the ocean. It could be under the ocean, on the floor of the ocean. It could be in the desert. It could be in the mountains. It could be in an urban situation. It could be in Philadelphia. So the battle spaces of tomorrow are undetermined, and we have to try to figure out how to survive and excel in those different battle spaces. And that's just on land. If you think about it, we also are now into the air and also into space. And so we're fighting a huge battle space. We call it the multi-domain battle space. And that also entails other things like cybersecurity and things like that we're not going to talk about today. But these dozen or so topics, are some of the problems that we need to work through to give our warfighters a mismatch, a survival mismatch, where we have an advantage over anybody that tries to harm us. So I want to suggest in this talk today to find solutions for each of these different topics and show you examples of things in nature that are helping us do just that. This is a picture I took of an eastern blue butterfly. As you'll probably know, people that know me, I spend about as much time as possible out in nature. I love science, but I'm really a naturalist, and I take photography, and I love all of the nature. So I put some of those slides in here, and in fact, it is what we use in science to help us work through the Department of Defense. William Wordsworth, his quote is quite prescient. Come forth into the light of things and let nature be your teacher. Indeed, we look for subject matter experts in these topics I just mentioned. And the truth is, Mother Nature has given us a SME in every one of those topics. It's pretty amazing. Their SME, their subject matter experts are not like ours. I mean, some of their subject matter experts have feathers, and some of them have scales. Some of them have wings and some of them don't, but they're quite different, but they're all expert in one thing: survivors. Everything in nature is here only because they're survivors. And so if we're trying to look at survival skills, what better place to look than using nature as an example? And you may have heard of these terms, biomimicry. Biomimicry is actually copying what nature has put out for us. For example, biomimicry might be looking at this beautiful blue color and saying, I would like to have something that color. That's a mimic. That is just mimicking that color. Biomimetics is entirely different. Biomimetics is actually using nature's structures and the science behind the color to our advantage to create disruptive technologies. So biomimetics is what we're really talking about through this lecture and through what I'm going to introduce in these 12 topics. So you see this blue butterfly is quite blue, but the truth is those wings aren't blue at all. Those wings are brown. They look blue, but they're brown. And the reason I can tell you that is you see that little worn spot up in the left top wing is brown. That is because the wing has been worn down and it no longer reflects light appropriately to give us that beautiful blue color. The pigment is brown, but the reflection is blue. And we can use that to our advantage in the warfighting world. You see now, they've called biomimetic Morphotex fibers. They use the exact same refractive issues that you see in the butterfly wings. They call them morpho because morpho is just a larger blue butterfly, gorgeous butterfly that you can see at the Smithsonian if you ever go down there. Morpho butterflies are the biggest blue butterflies in the world. They're 6 inches around, they're 6 inches across, so they're huge. The one I just showed you is a ½ inch wide. But the point of is the wings, they reflect light in a refractory way because of the way the structure is of the wing. They have nano they basically have nanoscales on the wings, and each nanoscale is arranged 200 microns apart or 200 nanometers apart. And because of that, white light reflects blue because of the structure. And they've taken advantage and matched this perfectly in this fabric. These are 3D printed, nano printed sheets of fabric. These have no pigment. This has no pigment. These fibers are 3D printed with different densities and widths. And because of that refraction index, they give you that blue color. So that's the difference between basically painting without color, without paint. Why is that important? Well, to us, camouflage is one of the most critical things in the war fighter. If you stand out, if you're wearing a red coat in the middle of the war, you're going to probably die first. So camouflage is critical to us. And so we can use this morphing textile to help us with our new uniforms, perhaps, so that we could become very invisible in nature, or we could make it specific so that only we could detect our soldiers by putting secret patches in our clothing, or perhaps using these paint colors to help obscure equipment, tanks and such, things like that, so that we can hide. So we can use the technology, the biomimetic properties of the butterfly wing to help us solve some of this, one of the major issues in survivability, and that is camouflage. Wow, look at this guy. This is a male wolf spider, probably one of the most intimidating faces around. Turns out the wolf spider is one of the tiniest spiders around. But this is a male, and he's quite the guy. But I wanted you to focus on the 8 eyes. Wolf spiders are known for their faces and fangs, and their jumping ability, but they're really a good illustration of the eyes. The 2 eyes, the bigger eyes, are more telescopic. The 2 lower in the set of 4 are really for close up. The 2 outside ones on the bottom are really to track how far you've traveled, almost like a GPS or a Waze system, Google Maps. And then the ones in back are just basically sensors, like your camera, your rear-facing camera when you put your car in reverse and you can see behind. Those only detect motion, so they keep you alive. So that's how the structure of the wolf spider is, and it's been very productive. The wolf spider's been around for a long, long time. But look what the military has done. You might notice a little similarity. This is our newest system, the integrated visual augmentation system. We spent $2.8 billion on this. And these are, this is an example of one of our newest technologies that we're trying to give our soldiers to give them advantage. They have a HoloLens too, which is an augmented reality screen where you could overlay virtual pictures onto real images. So you could put the picture of an injured soldier right on a real soldier and show you where to cut, for example. Let's say you had to do an emergency surgery. You can actually see the overlay right where to cut, almost like just cut along the line, for example. So you have a HoloLens as your main screen, but up above, you'll see that array of eyes. And those eyes can see in low light. They are also thermal cameras, and they also can track motion. So this is almost an identical replication in my mind to the wolf spider. And it also has a radio and things like that. But this is what we're equipping our soldiers out in the field with now. And you can imagine that if you have better situational awareness around you and being able to see better through any kind of conditions, night or day, you're going to have a significant advantage in survivability. It works for the wolf spider, and now it's working for the war fighter. So this is the comparison, and I think it's quite striking myself. Wow, I'm a birder too. I love birds. I don't know if anybody online is a birder, but this is one of the most beautiful hawks around. Yeah. This is a Cooper's hawk. They're known for really short bursts of ambush. They fly down and grab small rodents. I love hawks in general, but this is a Cooper's hawk. They can fly about 30 miles an hour. This is the B-2 Stealth Bomber. This was put out in 1988. This has been one of our most effective tools in our arsenal for many, many years. And if you look at them put together, I think you're going to see something quite remarkable. Oops, sorry. Look at the shape, almost identical. And if you want to actually, the most important part of this whole isn't just the width, but also the front. Because that little beak on the B2 That's what allows it not to crash when it takes off with a steep angle of attack and a full load. The animal kingdom, the bird kingdom, had figured that out with the rapid deceleration and acceleration of hawks, how to avoid stalling on climb. And so we've used that in the design of the B2. The B2 bomber can fly about 600 miles an hour, or a little bit faster than that, and it can fly across the ocean without refueling. We now have been told that this year, 2022, we're getting a new stealth bomber, which is the B21, which supposedly looks exactly shaped the same, maybe faster, a little bit more equipment, but the stealth is also one of those critical factors of survivability on the battle space. Can you get to where you need to go without anybody knowing you're there? And remember, the stealth fighters are supposed to be designed so nobody can detect you. Where a jet fighter, those are fast and low, and those are just trying to avoid being hit. The stealth bombers are not, and because of the width and the profile, they do not reflect the normal radar, and that's how they become stealthy. So anyway, people are working hard on how to change that, how to use different lower frequency radars to try to detect the stealth fighters. And so far, we've been a little bit ahead of them. But as you can imagine, from 1988 to now, it takes a long time to develop new stealth fighters. So big dollars, but very important. Being able to assert our mission anywhere in the world, whenever we want, without being detected. Cheetahs, one of everybody's favorite cats. Big black dots and very fast, can run 60 miles an hour. Usain Bolt from Jamaica, remember him, world's fastest man? He can run about 32 to 40 miles an hour. So he has no chance of competing with the cheetah. The cheetah averages 60 miles an hour, but can run up to 80 miles an hour, really. So incredible animals. Some of the important animals, it's not just the legs and the structure, is the ears and the tail act as rudders like an airplane. And they also have a way of fixing their head so their head doesn't move when they run, so they can keep focused on their prey. Really an incredible animal. Well, we like incredible animals, so let's make an incredible robot. This is Boston Dynamics' Cheetah robot. And at the time, it was one of the fastest robots that has ever been made. I don't recall the exact miles per hour, but it's around 30 to 40 miles an hour. And it was tethered by a cord and could only run on a treadmill. So it was a great achievement, but it still had some limitations. Most of the work that we do in our business is trying to figure out how to untether things, how to power them out where it matters. And this was a perfect example of building speed, but very impractical. They have a new one out now. It's called the Mini Cheetah, much smaller, can run not as fast, but it can flip and it doesn't need a cord. But we're trying to take all the advantages of the cheetah and animals like that, big cats, things like that, and for their agility and their speed. And so we're saying, it's cool, but so what? Well, it does make a huge difference to us, is because in the future, we're going to be using these robots to our advantage, especially a fast robot. It may help us produce a combat effectiveness. It may help us on the combat where actually we could send the robots fast, maybe move people quicker. But from a medical standpoint, we're interested in those robots getting our injured off the battle space. So if you can get in and get out with a casualty, that would be a huge thing. And they're looking at these animal model robots for those specific things and using how their joints work and how they are agile to our advantage. So again, Mother Nature has provided us the best subject matter experts in almost every field, and speed on the battle space is one of those critical factors. Is who's fastest wins. And it's not just physical speed. And I just want to take a second to mention that it's also cognitive speed. Who could think fastest is also going to win. And so that's where you see that IVAS system I just mentioned. Those are designed to help reduce cognitive load, but also to make decisions faster and better decisions. So speed is not just physical, but also mental. And also the stealth fighter, the same thing. The new upgrade, a lot of it may not be a faster engine, but the ability to shoot somebody further away faster is also going to be why they're worth billions of dollars. So speed keeps coming up in every conversation. And this is a good example of how Mother Nature has provided us with a great example on how to overcome gravity. Wow, speaking of gravity, carpenter ant. So what I'm doing here is I'm giving you a nature example. I'm giving you the technology and I'm trying to explain why it matters. That's, you see these things. I guess I could have said that up front, but that's kind of the plan. And there's a dozen of them. So this is the carpenter ant. Carpenter ants are pretty much considered a nuisance because they tend to destroy wood. They can carry a 10 to 50 times their body weight, which is pretty impressive. If you think about a 100-pound person, that would be equivalent to carrying a 5,000-pound car, which would be a small Honda Civic. That's how strong these ants are. 150-pound man or 150-pound person, that they would carry 7,500. That would be a Ford Sierra four-door pickup. If you can imagine how heavy they would be. That's how strong these little guys are. Well, that's pretty impressive. As I mentioned, everybody hates the carpenter ants, but the truth is they don't eat wood. They're not like termites. They actually just move it out of the way so they can live there. So how does that apply to the science world? Well, weight is a killer for us, and strength is a limiting factor. We have been working on exoskeletons and trying to become as strong as a carpenter ant for years. All the way back to 1961, they've been working on man amplifiers, which I think is a great title, frankly. A man amplifier, and they've never been able to define a way where the device wasn't worse than not having the device. And a lot of the problems we're having is just the stress on the ankles and the knees that's knocking our soldiers out. A lot of them can carry the weight, and they want to carry the weight, but the truth is their joints can't handle it. And so we've been working on these exoskeletons for some time to try to relieve the knee stress. This is called a knee stress relief device. It does show some effectiveness, but it takes power and it's heavy. And so what we're doing is we're kind of adding weight so we can carry more weight. And it's almost it's a negative return on investment, basically. Right now, we've stopped funding exoskeletons at this point. Maybe as we get better technology that we'll come back to it. But if you think about an average load on a combat personnel, we carry them in the Marines carry about 117 pounds of gear. Army a little bit more, 125 pounds on average. So if you're a 125-pound person, you could be carrying 125 pounds of gear. You're carrying yourself, or you're carrying your battle buddy. Can you imagine how hard it would be to go a long ways or a fight in an effective way? So weight is a critical factor. If you're a medic, you have to add another 25 pounds of medical gear. So you can see that the weight is a huge issue that we're trying to solve. And that's why we don't want to carry more batteries. If you can imagine carrying batteries along top of that. If you think about the Marines, a lot of times they're doing assaults. Well, they're also carrying big weapons. And the squad assault weapon, which is the SAW, which everybody talks about, is their automatic weapon. It saves so many lives. You can shoot 82 rounds a minute continuously. That weighs 25 to 30 pounds as well. So your weaponry weighs everything, and that's ammo. Think about the ammo. So when I was walking around Iraq with fully loaded up, you could barely walk around. You're walking around like turtles. And if we had to run, we'd have a big problem. So I guess that's why you carry a lot of ammo. You can't run. But anyway, exoskeletons is an example of trying to be like the carpenter ant. At this point, nature has solved their issues, but humans have not. Quartz. Well, beautiful green quartz. You wouldn't think that, I talked earlier about power being a limiting factor, and there's no extension cords and there's no outlets in the war. We need to bring our own type of batteries. And as you know, even a good battery will wear out. So you have to recharge your batteries. Well, there is no recharging station. So where are you going to recharge your batteries, even if you have them? Well, we have rechargers that we do set up at certain locations, but they're heavy and they're big and they're easy targets. So what we are looking for is effective power that's durable and doesn't have to be recharged. Well, Mother Nature has given us quartz. If you know the word piezoelectricity, is we know that energy is trapped within the crystals of the quartz. And with compression or with compression, for example, or striking it, that quartz will release that electricity. They'd use that in the old cigarette lighters from the old days, where you pushed a button, a little hammer came down, it actually struck a piece of quartz. And by striking the quartz, it created a spark. That was the old days. I guess, you don't see those anymore. But piezoelectricity is nothing new. It's been around a long time, and it's very, very fun to play with a quartz. Strike the quartz together and you'll see a spark. So you turn out the lights in a classroom, hit the two rose quartz together, and you'll see a big spark. It's kind of cool. Well, we could put those types of tools in a small fashion in the soles of a boot. Every time you walk and you compress the crystals, you'll get electricity. Enough electricity to power 3 cell phones. So piezoelectricity it does not exhaust, and it is a steady current. It can't produce, it's very steady. I guess that's all I can say. So again, the problem is carrying around stones is not a great thing. It's heavy. So we're having the problem with this weight and return on investment. Triboelectricity is static electricity. If you don't use cling in your dryer sheets and your clothes come out with static and you pull them apart and you see the energy, that's triboelectric energy. That's what's on this person right here, is a triboelectric battery. Every time his knee bends, it produces friction, which charges the battery. And that produces renewable energy. Now, this one is different than piezoelectricity. Piezoelectricity gives you the same amount of output no matter what you do to it. Triboelectricity, the more friction, the more energy. So again, we're looking at wearable power from crystals, metals, and minerals. Remember that IVAS system has to have a huge battery pack. So if you have crystals and metals that you could now power your own IVAS system, that would be a big advantage. Okay, millipedes. Everybody hates millipedes. I kind of like them, which is kind of weird, but I like them. Millipedes, it means 1,000,000 feet. That's what millipede means. I guess 1,000, not 1,000,000, 1,000 feet. I got confused. Millipede means 1,000 feet. Truth is, no millipede has ever had 1,000 feet. The one that holds the most record is 750 feet. So it's a misnamed animal insect. So millipedes normally have 400 feet. These are facts you don't need to know. But anyway, the millipede is an interesting crawly thing, poisonous, not something you really want to mess with. And why would I bring that up? Is because of those feet. Metachronal magnetic microrobots. That's a mouthful. But it uses the same mode of location as that millipede I just showed you. Those cilia move in a wave fashion, just like at the sports arenas where everybody goes up and down as the wave. This is the exact same. This is a magnetic generated wave. Well, that's nothing new. We've had artificial cilia for some time. It requires a lot of electricity, and we can make and produce a wave that will do this. All of our eukaryotic cells that have a nucleus have these little cilia, by the way. But that's just a side point. So they've created this magnetic micro robot. The difference is between this and other artificial cilia and movement is that this doesn't require it doesn't require any energy input. What they did is they created this elastic ferrous, basically spike or cilia. And they have different, different elastic properties. And so what happens is when a magnet passes over, it moves the waves one way, but based on their thickness and their elasticity, they come back at a different way and create us a wave. So it's waving a magnet, a circular magnet around these will actually propel this darn mini robot at a very fast pace. It is incredible. I didn't explain it that well because it's difficult, but it is an amazing micro robot. It will walk on the ceiling. It will walk up a 45. It walks as fast as a human. And it carries 10 times more weight than any other micro robot to date. That's a big deal. So why is this important? Well, movement is one of the most critical things. Getting out of the way of trouble is very advantageous on the battle space, and getting to where you need to be also. You can envision that if you had a quiet mode, doesn't require a diesel engine, and can travel over any terrain at a very fast and steady pace, only using a magnet that does not wear out. The elasticity is permanent. It doesn't wear out. So you have these permanent magnetic feet that will take you where you need to go quietly. As the technology advances, they'll probably get faster and be able to carry loads that who knows. So maybe this will be the evacuation system of the future. Maybe this will go on their feet in the future to help us long distance walk. Who knows where this could take us? If you think about the moon or the ISS, the International Space Station, or Mars, this could be the propulsion for the rovers of the future. Who knows where this is going to take us? But that silly millipede is giving us a huge advantage. And that to me is why I love science. The science is giving these SMEs, this one's a slithery SME, but just as good as anything else. Well, staying with the kind of ugly worms, this is the fall fall armyworm moth caterpillar. This is considered a pest. Everybody hates these guys. They destroy corn. They're really kind of destructive. And that's why they call them armyworms, is because they're invasive. And they're characteristic. You can see that on the face, this little inverted Y. That's how you know you're dealing with the armyworm. Well, armyworms are kind of nondescript. They feed the birds. They aren't poisonous, so they are an effective food chain. So I don't have a problem with them. But the reason that I brought it up in this lecture is because of this. And COVID is a big deal. COVID can't be, we talk about COVID every day, and what's amazing, down in Gaithersburg, Novovax, small company in Gaithersburg, has now come up with a new COVID vaccine, and they utilize that silly armyworm I just talked about. The Novovax is a different vaccine. It uses proteins instead of using mRNA. So what they do is they take the spike proteins from coronavirus. Those spike proteins are the most, the spike proteins is what allows it to enter our cells. They take those spike proteins and they put them in the nucleus of a armyworm cell. And using a combination called baculovirus, they insert the spike protein into the baculovirus into the armyworm cell, and it produces those coronavirus proteins. Then we take those coronavirus proteins that cannot infect human, and we put them in a human, add some soap, and then we get an effective immune response. So it's kind of a long-winded thing, but we're using that silly worm to our huge advantage in developing vaccines that are 96% effective and have very little side effects that we're seeing with the Moderna or the Pfizer mRNA vaccines. So the little company down in Gaithersburg is doing extremely well. And this is a schematic that shows you these little spike proteins on a nanoparticle. And that's what we can inject into a person, add a little soap from a tree bark, which causes irritation and causes an inflammation reaction. This is what triggers our immune response, and this is what gives us immunity to COVID. It's effective against all variants, and so this is exciting and a very exciting news. That little worm could be very helpful. They use that little worm, the armyworm, in many recombinant vaccines from flu. This not in the past. So I think it's great to turn a pest into something that productive myself. Ooh, dragonflies. So this is a picture I took of a dragonfly. I love taking pictures of these guys. Quite a machine, if you think about it. The dragonfly can fly, hover, fly backwards. It is an extraordinarily fast flyer, very effective hunter, and all kinds of shapes and sizes, correct? So let's look and see why I brought this into this discussion. Black Hawk helicopters. I know there's four personnel there, but I'm going to focus on the helicopter in the back there. Those Black Hawk helicopters have saved countless lives and helped us execute many missions. I was very fortunate to fly all over Iraq a couple times, 3 to 4 times a week in those medevac Black Hawks. I'm very positive on this. But what I'm bringing this up is the Dragonfly has influenced the rotors on our helicopters and influenced the flight mechanics of not only the Black Hawk, but other Sikorsky and other Bell helicopters that we utilize in the military. Being able to hover, fly backwards, especially in our attack helicopters and things like that, incredible influence. So much of an influence, if you think about Bell helicopters, which is a huge military provider, has actually changed their entire logo. Their logo actually is a logo of a dragonfly. That's how much it's influenced that company. So that's large scale flying, right? But also the future, and what we've seen over and over now, is development of drones and miniature drones that actually can deliver goods onto the battle space, maybe bring blood, maybe bring ammo. We can use drones for a lot of reasons, for situational awareness and such. Being able to hover and maneuver and quietly advance, flying in blacked out, no lights, which is the Black Hawk is famous for, is flying with no lights. Those kind of things are critical. But that's the micro level. Now we can get down to the nanoscale level, or into micro Dragonfly drones that we can use for a whole another slew of things. So the Dragonfly has a tremendous influence on our military because of that, the helicopter designs. This is notable to me. Not only do Dragonflies inspire helicopters, to me, this inspires me because this is the first all-female helicopter medevac crew in the United States. And so I think this is a great achievement, and it probably shouldn't be an achievement. It is, and this is now becoming almost commonplace, but it wasn't common when this happened. And so you've got to give credit to these brave warfighters right here for basically paving the way for the future warfighter. So I'll tell you, I jumped on many of these helicopters in the middle of the night, and I look up front and I see these little bitty tiny bodies flying these helicopters. I'll never get over that. The helmet's twice as big as their bodies, and they're young as can be, maybe they're 20, and they have all the responsibility of flying a Black Hawk in Ramadi, Iraq, in the middle of the night in a war zone. I just can't tell you, it's a proud moment that we have this quality of people serving our country. Let's leave it at that. Movement is critical on the battle space. If you can get to point A to point B without being caught, getting where you need to be ahead of the other group, that's a big deal. So movement, Dragonfly, you gotta love it. Dr. Sun, you're gonna love this one because we've spent a lot of time on murmuration. We've created a lot of product lines with murmuration. It's kind of an inside joke. It's a big deal. We're using murmuration to our advantage. You may know what murmuration is, you may not. If you look up at the flocks of starlings, everybody hates starling birds, those blackbirds, everybody just really doesn't like starlings. But they are the best. They exhibit a pattern called murmuration that is just incredible, where you see these flows of flocks, hundreds of birds flying in unison. How do they do that without hitting each other? And also we think in the ocean, you think these huge schools of fish. They don't call it murmuration in fish. They call it the shoaling. It's the same thing, but it's in fish. And they can swim in these swarms, and it provides protection, from predation and such. But how do they know where to fly or where to swim without hitting each other? Well, it turns out it's quite an interesting mathematical equation. What happens is each bird only looks out to 6 other birds. The 6 closest birds to that bird is all that it cares about. It tries to stay away from the closest 2 or 3 and stay within range of the other 4. That's how it works. It's a mathematical equation. And by doing so, it creates a system, a flow. But each bird is only caring about 6 birds, not anybody else. So we can use that to our advantage. We can put it down into sensors. And we're talking down to nano sensors, which are, if you think about a nanometer, hard to really know what a nanometer is. It's tiny. Let's just say you have a human hair. There's 68,000 nanometers in a human hair. So you can imagine the scale we're talking about. It's very hard to really even imagine what the size we're talking about. These little sensors, these are actually sensors at that level of scale. And what happens is most of the time we have a sensor, it's hooked to a master computer. Just think of the human body. You touch a hot stove, the signal has to go from your hand to your brain, to spinal cord, actually it goes to the spinal cord and back, but it isn't, the computer has to decide to return the hand. That takes time. But what if you didn't have to have a central computer? This is where we could use murmuration to our effect. If each of those nano sensors only pays attention to the 6 around it, you can create a systemic effect without ever having to send signal back to a master computer or any kind of decision maker. The decision can be made at a tremendously fast pace because of that. So we can use the Mother Nature SME that has feathers and use this to advantage when we 3D print nano sensors that can detect movement, send signal, and give us all kinds of benefits, detect gases, tremendous impact on human health and warfighting. And so I think that's just fascinating. It's just a mathematical equation. And kudos to whoever figured this out, because it looks like mass chaos, but the truth is it's organized chaos and it's mathematical. Communication on the battle space is one of those critical factors. It doesn't matter how many soldiers you have if they're not talking to one another, because you'll end up killing each other, right? Communication is key. And that's why we're so concerned about the battle spaces of the future, is because the first thing our enemies are going to do is knock out communication, right? The first thing. So this murmuration thing and actually just paying attention to your battle buddies probably could work in that same fashion. But communication is key. This is something we have multiple investments in 3D printing and trying to figure out the best use of the newest technologies. It's no small feat to create and reproduce these small nanoparticles with precision. It is huge, and it's amazing what we've accomplished, or what researchers accomplished. Moving along, doing well. Hope everybody's hanging in there. The lightning bug. Wow, that's everybody's favorite as a child, right? Everybody loved the lightning bug. I came from Kansas. We used to stand out in fields for years and catch those things, put them in jars. I don't know if you did that. I hope you did. But lightning bugs are almost a magical insect as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not even talking about the fact that they flash. I'm just talking about their wings. They have incredible flying ability. Even though they really are kind of, from this angle, it looks kind of ugly, it is a beautiful flying machine. And it has inspired the Eliza insect robots. And this is one of the newest micro robots that can fly like crazy. And the reason this one is so new and so different is that it doesn't have gears and flaps like everything else has been designed to date. This uses the same wing patterns as a lightning bug. It's the same size as a dragonfly, but the wings are fashioned after the lightning bug that I just showed you. The technology on this is really amazing. What they've done is they've used electrical charges to our advantage. Instead of a gear and motor, what they've done is they put positive charge above and positive charge below the wing. The wing is actually negatively charged. As you apply a very small current to the positive charge above, the wing will deflect that direction. You reverse the current down below, it will then flap that way. You can get these to flap 80 times a second, and it doesn't require gears and an engine, basically. So you get this tremendous durability, you get this tremendous wing speed, and you have very, very low motion and very few parts. So this is the newest thing in insect robots. Well, we know insect robots could have tremendous power on the battle space, because you can go places with that you couldn't go with anything else. And that can deliver a lot of intelligence. It can deliver weaponry. It can do all kinds of things for us. And it could also be scaled up to larger types of things that can carry people, supplies, etc. But this is Eliza insect robot. And I think you're going to be hearing more about this high performance liquid amplified zipping actuator, which just basically means rapid wing motion without gears. I find this fascinating. Science continues to amaze me, and we are in the business of tech watching. And so we sit and think about the problems we have, and we're looking for technology to solve them. And frankly, Mother Nature has probably been the most reliable source of inspiration that I can think of in my years. Movement. Like I said before, if you can move on the battle space, that's going to be a huge advantage to survivability. We're getting near the end. Hope everybody's hanging in there. The chimpanzee, this is an albino chimpanzee. These are very rare, very, very rare. And they usually do not last in the wild, unfortunately. Their own species will actually kill them usually. They're so foreign that the chimpanzee community will not accept it. It's kind of terrible stories, but they will not survive usually in the wild. And if they did, predators would locate them in a heartbeat. So it is a cute little guy, but not a good thing for nature. But the reason I'm bringing him up in this talk is, think about this. Robotics. This robot was designed specifically to make you like it. So it's to produce empathy. And I think it looks remarkably similar to this guy. And this robot is actually in use. These are about $1,700 a piece. They use them in a lot of high-end hotels now in Las Vegas, across the country and across the world. These are empathy robots. Interesting enough, they experimented with different voices, and they found that nobody likes it with a male voice. So I think that's kind of funny. But with a female voice, people find it very reassuring and very, very favorable. They would rather deal with this robot than a human being in customer service. Well, in our work, and I kind of led with this, I work with dummies. Well, not everybody cares about plastic the way they do something that had a pulse, right? If we're trying to get people to really put a lot of effort into saving the life of a mannequin, they often won't do it, because they know at the end of the day, nobody's dying, everybody's going home. They just wash the mannequin off and start again fresh tomorrow. But if it's a human being, that's a whole different ballgame. And we talk about empathy, and we are trying to increase empathy, which is caring about something greater than yourself. Now, it's easy to look at this little albino chimp and feel empathy. You want to protect that thing, you want to take him home, right? Well, they've used the same technology in this robot. We have invested heavily in empathy and how we can influence a soldier's brain to make them care about something they normally wouldn't care about. And it's making our robotic work and our medical simulation much more effective, because we get better output, because when people care about something and they focus, they learn better and they remember more, and then they perform better downrange. So this is a good example of how Mother Nature has been used as a model to help us find things that we find naturally empathetic. And then what we're doing is investing in ways to make the unnatural empathy. So a lot more to be said about that. But again, speed I talked about on the battle space. Speed of decisions is everything. And if you care about what you're doing and you have empathy, when you see a casualty, you want to provide a tremendous amount of empathy to that casualty. And we actually, because people become in the fog of war and battle hardened, a lot of times empathy is put on the back shelf. And when it comes to actually having to take care of somebody, sometimes people forget to get it. And I think this happens. I'm a medical doctor. I think it happens to all of us. As an emergency room physician, sometimes we get a little cold because we've seen it and we have to put empathy back to survive, right? That isn't good. That's not good. We need to use our empathy and compassion whenever possible. And so this is what this is supposed to illustrate, how we're using Mother Nature to our advantage to develop these new technologies that make a difference. Well, I've run my course. I hope that you've got a sense of where I was going with this. Inspiration through imitation. You know, I've kind of introduced you to and maybe reinforced this idea of biomimetics, being able to use the long-running history of nature, Mother Nature, to give us these great examples on how to deal with the impossible problems of today and tomorrow. Not just on the battle space, because not everybody is on the battle space. I know most of us on this call are not on the battle space, but if you think about life, it's very similar. We just don't maybe have quite the violence, but there is a lot of challenges where we need speed and communication and all those same factors and resiliency and making good decisions. It really carries whatever your battlefield is, it does apply. And certainly science is answering the same questions for the civilian world as the way in the military world. Just think about this computer that we're looking at and the Zoom and our cell phones and all the technology that it takes to make this meeting happen is really being solved through biomimetics and such. I've given you 12 technologies, basically 12 challenges that we face every day that I sit and work on trying to find solutions for. And I think you can see how valuable the mimicking nature and using that as a structure to go forward has been for us. Now, true, not everybody is in this way. Not everybody's using the animal world to make technology. the truth is some people are using technology to create the animal world. Maybe one day we'll have another woolly mammoth again. So it isn't just a one-way street. It's kind of cool to think about that. But I wanted to give you 12 technologies that relate to what I do. As you notice, it's a pretty heavy military theme. It's just because that's where I work. And I wanted to share that with you. I hope it inspires the young scientists to say, I love science too. Some of these topics probably more inspirational than others. I want to remind those that have been in the scientific world for some time of the path they probably contributed to. You've contributed to some of the science, which thank you for that. And it's fun to kind of think about the evolution of science. And then I just wanted to share my joy and my love of science and my love of nature and how that has worked to solve these problems in the military. Most people wouldn't think necessarily that nature and the military are directly connected, but they certainly are. So I think for the love of science, that's all I have. I appreciate your attention. I hope I've stimulated some thought, and thank you very much. And I'm open to any questions you might have.
We'd like to thank Dr. Darrin Frye for his presentation, and please just unmute yourself to ask a question for Dr. Frye. You can just unmute and hop in.
I'm Ron Hietala. I'll go. Dr. Frye, I was very impressed with your presentation, and in particular, your facial expressions and the earnestness in your voice. It lent a lot of power to the presentation. So I was very impressed with that. Can you tell me where you got that?
Well, I've loved science. I just love science, so it's easy. I don't have to do anything. It just happens. I have to control my enthusiasm. I think I work with May a lot, so she knows. It's easy to be excited about things you love. And I truly do love nature. I've taken over 60,000 animal pictures. And so it's easy for me to see the two. When I'm out in the nature, I feel at peace. I'm able to think. I'm very respectful. I think my background, I have a very diverse background. I grew up in Kansas, which we grew up on the earth, on the ground. We managed basically farming. So we're very grounded to the earth and respectful to nature and things like that. And then my military background helped me realize that life is valuable. And really made me very patriotic and very, very focused on helping people. And then, of course, I'm in a Master Naturalist course from Maryland, which to me is fantastic in conservation and things. So all these loves are kind of coming together, and I think that's what you're seeing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Frye, my name's Joanne Horn. It was really a fascinating talk. Thanks so much for sharing. And I'm a biologist too, so I really appreciate a lot of what you love as well. But I was wondering this idea about mermation and having sensor arrays or that are kind of localized or communications that are sort of distributed. How does that sort of comport with the military's kind of centralized decision making? Because it seems to be, there seems to be a little bit of conflict there. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely, it is exactly in conflict with the force structure and authorities for action. But my portfolio is now considered the expeditionary medicine portfolio. And the old days where we fought in mass are probably going to be limited. We're now fighting an expeditionary warfare where we're sending small teams, fire teams, maybe 6 people out. And we're fighting these micro wars in an expeditionary fashion. And there is, and one of the benefits of that is you don't have a large footprint. People don't know you're there, and you want to maintain that. So you don't have the ability a lot of times to have any kind of communication.
Right.
So they empower these fire teams to make decisions on their own, basically, within the general scheme, but they're empowered to make their own decisions. So I agree with you in general. It is a bad idea to start making your own decisions on the battlefield and go against the command because you're going to get chaos. So you're right. I think what it is that memoration is not going to be a sole technology. It'll be an enabling technology, and work through AI and some of these other types of machine learning where we can get a global, quick decision. That basically is like I was saying, the burn response for finger to spine back to finger, may go from murmuration to artificial intelligence back to that. So I do think you're right. I totally agree with you. It is a problem, and we have to reconcile it.
Thank you. Great answer.
Yeah.
Dr. Frye, I just want to echo what my colleagues from Washington Academy of Sciences expressed. Intriguing talk, fascinating. I absolutely loved it. It's a very different way of presenting science. We want to have talks like this so we can recruit more scientists, next generation of scientists. Thank you for presenting to us. And I think Judy is going to record this, and many, many more people are going to benefit from your lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice.
Dr. Mina has an extensive Army background also. She worked for the Army for some time.
Well.
Years ago, a lot of things have changed.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but you did that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really get into space, and I love talking about space, and that might be for another day, but this whole new era of space and how that's going to affect the military, and not just the military, but the International Space Station and the moon and Mars is also a huge thing that we're looking at, not only from the military, but wow, talk about an avenue to open up for exploration in science.
Dr. Frye, for the kids, what age did you really realize that you loved science when you were in grade school?
I don't know. I decided to be a doctor when I was 5, so I don't think I've known anything else. I love biology from the beginning, but my start was really in physics. That's what I liked. Physics was what I loved the most, oddly enough. And then I think my parents influenced me tremendously. They were birders, and I spent a lot of time with both my parents as they spent a lot of time out in nature. And that, from then on, I became crazy, and I just love birds, bugs, butterflies, anything like that. I am all over it. So I'm on the fire for biology.
I agree. I was in 3rd grade when I knew I loved science, when I won my first science fair. So that even inspired me more.
Yeah.
But I think, go ahead.
No, I had one thing you just reminded me of. Now, this is for the young scientists real quick, is that, my first formal research was at the University of Kansas. And I got this little gig and I didn't know what I was doing, and they hired me anyway. And I basically was working with little white rats, and we were working some brain research, and it was for the United States Army. And it turns out that they were working on nerve gas antidotes. And I had no exposure to that, and nothing, but it turns out through that work, we then made recommendations to the Army that what should be in the nerve antidote kit, or the NAC kit. And who would have thought that 17 years later, when I get mobilized to Baghdad, I'm carrying the same kit that we helped design 17 years ago. So my point is that what you're doing now is going to make a difference. What science is being done is going to help somebody. You don't know how long, but it may be yourself. So it is really amazing to think about that little science matters. I just wanted to bring that up.